Okay, next news topic. This is something I asked Oliver to look in because obviously we had our big PlayStation 5 Pro hands-on this week, and one of the components of that was Dragon's Dogma 2. And we got to see how it looked and ran on the PlayStation 5 Pro, and Alex actually did the frame rate testing for that particular clip, and because he was particularly interested to see how that would all pan out. And so we included it in the Direct, and it kind of demonstrated that, this concept of 60 frames per second gaming on the Pro, it's going to be title dependent. But I noticed a lot of people picked up on the analysis in that and were kind of like trying to demonstrate that there were perhaps bigger Pro advantages than we actually think there are, because we hadn't actually looked at the latest patch for Dragon's Dogma 2 on the standard consoles yet. So, Oliver, can you talk us through your testing here? I guess there's two things here, which is, first of all, how does the base compare to the Pro as close as we can get them in similar scenarios where we know the CPU is stressed? And secondly, in terms of A to B comparisons with the existing clips that we have of the game, is there that much of an improvement?
So I think what I'd say here is that if we look at the Pro footage and we try to match it with max settings on the base PS5 there, we get a much lower frame rate on the base PS5. But you do have to remember that the PS5 is probably rendering something north of 4 million pixels in general play there, whereas based on pixel counts, the PS5 Pro is probably rendering more in like the vicinity of 1080p with PSSR. So right. That is opening up a lot of GPU time in all likelihood with the PSSR process from a much lower resolution with that larger GPU there. So I think that explains some of it there. And I think one thing that's very interesting that I did here is when we remove the GPU more from the equation on PS5 by engaging the very lowest settings option, that low quality option, which turns off the RT and turns off or rather lowers the resolution, we get better frame rate numbers than the Pro footage. Right. So if we add in the RT, but keep the GPU bottleneck out of that picture, you might get something like Pro performance there with the increased burden in that CPU there. Assuming it's CPU limited there, it doesn't seem like rocket science there to me to get that PS5 Pro performance. It doesn't seem like something that's that transformative. And again, I kind of think that people looking at Dragon's Dogma 2 and saying this is like exemplary of PS5 Pro performance should probably find a different game, because this game has such weird performance and it's got so many bits of strangeness, and the way that it runs on consoles is kind of in some ways a little bit inexplicable. So yeah, I mean, in person it felt like in the city we're looking at like maybe 50-ish FPS in that city area, doing a little run through it ish, maybe a little lower, which seems like it'd be kind of in the cards here. But I guess in terms of that second question, in terms of performance relative to prior patches, I did test the new patch on PS5, which I think is patch 9 relative to patch 7. In GPU bound scenarios, there's no performance difference. It runs exactly the same. But in the city, it does run a little faster than patch 7. A little bit faster, not much. It's not a huge difference. It's maybe a few frames per second, but it is there. And it is consistent throughout the run. So it's consistently running like anywhere between 2 and 4 FPS faster than the base PS5 model there. So that is something. It's not transformative. And again, that's an increase that's happening independent of a hardware change. So yeah, I do think that people who are looking to Dragon's Dogma 2 to give them a view on the PlayStation 5 Pro's performance should probably pick something else. And I also think that if you actually look at that base PS5, the fact that I'm able to actually get a higher frame rate than that Pro footage shows that this game is actually, a little bit different than what people maybe are expecting from it.
Okay, fair enough. Any comments on that, Alex? Because you were curious about this one as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I was just curious, actually, with regards to the running through the city. Like, if you look at it now, like, where's the frame rate hovering when you're running through the city, doing that run around that you did? Like, what is it like hovering at nowadays?
It's at like 36, 37, 38, something like that. FPS.
That's interesting.
With RT fully on.
All right, that's interesting. I'm wondering if it's also there running into both like I'm just curious like how much of it is the GPU versus CPU. We know the area at least at launch was super CPU limited, but now that they haven't changed the graphics, but the frame rate keeps going up, I'm wondering if it is actually technically could run faster in the CPU in that area, but the GPU is just getting in the way. You know what I mean? It's hard to know. I guess we'll know a lot more when we can do one-to-ones when the Pro comes out, which will tell us, other than like the little performance bump that you'll get on the CPU from the Pro having a slightly faster CPU there, then we'll actually get an understanding of where the bottleneck lies.